If you love feeding your fish but want to avoid some preventable issues that can arise from less than ideal feeding practices, this video is for you. This is Riley with All Things Fish Keeping, and in today's video, we'll be talking about, you guessed it, best practices for feeding your fish. There's no denying that feeding your fish is one of the most enjoyable and rewarding parts of the fish keeping hobby. Regardless of how long you've kept fish or how many aquariums you currently have, it's just one of those things that never seems to get old. And that seems to be true no matter what species of fish you keep. But it's because feeding your fish can be so fun that it's easy to fall into the trap of overfeeding your fish or getting into other bad feeding habits. When I think of what makes a successful, enjoyable aquarium, one of the things that comes to mind for me is balance. That aspect of balancing lights, bioload, plants, and other elements can be really enjoyable to create a harmonious aquarium. And while it's unfortunate, one of the things that's most fun about keeping our fish tanks, that is feeding our fish, is often one of the areas where we cause the most problems and create the most imbalance in our aquariums. It can be really tempting, especially if you spend a lot of time around your aquariums throughout the day, to just toss in a little extra food here and there because you enjoy watching your fish feed. And while this might not create much of an issue in the short term, if continued for the long term, can amount to some serious issues and imbalances. And those issues can arise for a couple of different related reasons. One is leftover fish food that's uneaten because you fed too much food, so the fish don't have the ability to eat it, and it sinks to the bottom and begins to rot and break down. Another related factor is fish waste. Obviously, the more your fish eat, the more waste that they'll produce, even if they're eating that food. And when you have this broken down, uneaten food, or this excess of fish waste, that can lead to spikes in ammonia, to elevated nitrates, and other things that can cause illness and stress for your fish, along with things like algae and bacteria blooms. Thankfully, though, these are issues that can be avoided fairly easily in most cases through proper feeding habits and good basic aquarium maintenance. With all that in mind, I want to cover two important areas that can help you to be successful when it comes to feeding your fish. The first one is the frequency, how often and how much to feed your fish, and the second is what types of foods might be best for you to feed your fish. And while I think these tips are helpful in general, it's always important to keep in mind as you hear these and other tips that you may pick up from other people and other places, that certainly your own unique circumstances and the species of fish that you keep will determine what's going to be best for you. If you do have any specific questions or comments, feel free to throw those in the comment section below. Okay, so let's dive into topic one, that is how often and how much to feed your fish. If you read the instructions on most processed dry fish foods such as flakes or pellets, you might see instructions such as feed your fish 2 or 3 times per day, as much as they can eat in a few minutes. And while in some cases that may make sense, I think a better rule in general is to feed your fish 1 or 2 times per day, as much as they can eat in approximately 30 seconds. In the vast majority of scenarios, this will provide your fish with plenty of food that they need to grow and to be healthy, but will help to greatly reduce the chances that you'll have issues related to overfeeding. I've personally found it helpful to get into a habit of feeding my fish at the same time each day, and if it's helpful for you, you may even consider getting an automatic feeder that you can set to feed your fish once per day and to dial in the amount of food you want to give so that it's automatic and doesn't really give you that opportunity to overfeed. If you realize you have been overfeeding your fish and you know there's leftover food down in the substrate of your tank, consider skipping a single day of feeding your fish and allowing them the opportunity to go and clean up that food that's left over and get things back on track before resuming feeding the next day. Alright, now I want to quickly transition to what types of food to feed your fish. And while I think in general most dried processed foods will be a good choice for your fish as long as they eat it and it meets their needs, I do think it's important to keep in mind that feeding things like live foods, insects, or live feeder fish is something that you should do with extreme caution, not only because it can introduce diseases or other contaminants to your tank, but also because of the risk of increased organic matter that can break down and rot in the tank. I do think there are some situations where this could potentially make sense. I do at times feed for example, crickets from the pet store to my African butterfly fish, but I think it should definitely be the exception and not the rule. This should be done just kind of sparingly here and there. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. Really hope it's been helpful for you and provided some insight. If it has been helpful, or if you've enjoyed the video, please do consider leaving a like on the video or subscribing to the channel if you'd like to see more similar content in the future. There's certainly a lot more that could be said on the topic of feeding fish. And again, if you do have any comments or questions, feel free to throw those down in the comment section below, and we'll leave some of those things for another day. Thanks again, and hope to see you on the next one.